McNeil. I play trumpet in the Saskatoon Jazz Orchestra, in the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra, and I teach brass and jazz-related classes at the University of Saskatchewan. Through this series of videos, we hope to help students understand what jazz is, how it works, how to approach listening to it, and how to approach playing it. In general, we hope to demystify what jazz is. And this is so that students in our community can enjoy being part of this wonderful cultural heritage of jazz, which is intended to be an exceptionally inclusive musical art form. To start with, we're dedicating this first video to focusing on the why within jazz. Why bother even learning anything about this music? Why is it so special? Why do so many people around the world love it so much? Why bother making an effort to learn how to play it and understand it? In the videos to follow, we'll be asking students to roll up their sleeves and dig into the realm of learning of how to play jazz. We hope to point students in the right direction so that they can learn how to approach jazz phrasing, how to negotiate jazz harmony and rhythm, common practice in these jazz settings, and to learn a little bit about the origins of the history of the music. We hope to help students develop their own personalized listening jazz library, and in general, we hope to focus on perhaps the most central component of jazz, which is learning how to improvise. But more about this later. For now, let's get back to talking about why students would even want to consider learning some things about jazz. We started this video series on April 29th, which just happens to be International Jazz Day, declared by UNESCO, which stands for the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And International Jazz Day began back in 2011. Here's a link to the April 2020 International Jazz Day free online concert. You might want to check it out after watching this video, and to that end I'll leave a copy of all the links that we'll be referring to in this video at the end of this video. On UNESCO's International Jazz Day website, you'll also find a quote by the well-known musician and music producer Quincy Jones. On this website, Jones states that jazz has the power to make people forget their differences and come together. Jazz is the personification of transforming overwhelmingly negative circumstances into freedom, friendship, hope, and dignity. So before we dive too deep into the realm of jazz specifically, let's talk a little bit about why playing any musical instrument is really good for our body and our brain at any age. Before we continue in this video, I'd like you to watch a little 4-minute TED Talk.
Did you know that every time musicians pick up their instruments, there are fireworks going off all over their brain? On the outside, they may look calm and focused, reading the music and making the precise and practiced movements required. But inside their brains, there's a party going on. How do we know this? Well, in the last few decades, neuroscientists have made enormous breakthroughs in understanding how our brains work by monitoring them in real time with instruments like fMRI and PET scanners. When people are hooked up to these machines, tasks such as reading or doing math problems each have corresponding areas of the brain where activity can be observed. But when researchers got the participants to listen to music, they saw fireworks. Multiple areas of their brains were lighting up at once as they processed the sound, took it apart to understand elements like melody and rhythm, and then put it all back together into unified musical experience. And our brains do all this work in the split second between when we first hear the music and when our foot starts to tap along. But when scientists turn from observing the brains of music listeners to those of musicians, the little backyard fireworks became a jubilee. It turns out that while listening to music engages the brain in some pretty interesting activities, playing music is the brain's equivalent of a full-body workout. The neuroscientists saw multiple areas of the brain light up, simultaneously processing different information in intricate, interrelated, and astonishingly fast sequences. But what is it about making music that sets the brain alight? The research is still fairly new, but neuroscientists have a pretty good idea. Playing a musical instrument engages practically every area of the brain at once, especially the visual, auditory, and motor cortices. And as with any other workout, Disciplined, structured practice in playing music strengthens those brain functions, allowing us to apply that strength to other activities. The most obvious difference between listening to music and playing it is that the latter requires fine motor skills, which are controlled in both hemispheres of the brain. It also combines the linguistic and mathematical precision in which the left hemisphere is more involved with the novel and creative content that the right excels in. For these reasons, playing music has been found to increase the volume and activity in the brain's corpus callosum, the bridge between the two hemispheres, allowing messages to get across the brain faster and through more diverse routes. This may allow musicians to solve problems more effectively and creatively in both academic and social settings. Because making music also involves crafting and understanding its emotional content and message, musicians often have higher levels of executive function, a category of interlinked tasks that includes planning, strategizing, and attention to detail, and requires simultaneous analysis of both cognitive and emotional aspects. This ability also has an impact on how our memory systems work. And indeed, musicians exhibit enhanced memory functions, creating, storing, and retrieving memories more quickly and efficiently. Studies have found that musicians appear to use their highly connected brains to give each memory multiple tags, such as a conceptual tag, an emotional tag, an audio tag, and a contextual tag, like a good internet search engine. So how do we know that all these benefits are unique to music as opposed to, say, sports or painting? Or could it be that people who go into music were already smarter to begin with? Neuroscientists have explored these issues, but so far they have found that the artistic and aesthetic aspects of learning to play a musical instrument are different from any other activity studied, including other arts. And several randomized studies of participants who showed the same levels of cognitive function and neural processing at the start found that those who were exposed to a period of music learning showed enhancement in multiple brain areas compared to the others. This recent research about the mental benefits of playing music has advanced our understanding of mental function, revealing the inner rhythms and complex interplay that make up the amazing orchestra of our brain.
So we know that brain researchers are finding more and more evidence that shows us that playing almost any style of music on any instrument is good for our mind and body. And we know that UNESCO values greatly jazz specifically as a positive agent of our social and collective humanity. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the impact of listening to music, I'd also invite you to watch a little TED Talk that I made a while ago entitled Please Listen Carefully, and that link is also popping up in the bottom of your screen. The Brain Research video and the UNESCO Declaration of International Jazz Day combined suggest to me that jazz is worth the effort regardless of your age, of where you live, of what culture or cultures you have grown up within and around. Jazz seems to be well suited as a sub-discipline within music and as its own art form specifically to bring people together from many cultural backgrounds in interesting and unique ways. Jazz values at its core cooperation, creativity, individuality, artistry, self-expression on an individual and collective basis. This makes jazz music and the study of it worthy of anyone's time and attention, in my opinion. Now, did you know that the very first jazz record was recorded in 1917, over 100 years ago? Jazz, which was synonymous in many ways with popular music in the United States at the time, helped many people through some pretty rough times back then. Another example of jazz bringing hope and joy to the world is exemplified for me through the song On the Sunny Side of the Street. It was composed in 1930 while North America was in the midst of the Great Depression. This song became a popular hit, helping an entire generation to think positively about better days ahead. Here's a link to one of my favorite recordings of this song, as performed by the great Nat King Cole and his trio. Another idea that I'd like to share with you is to talk about why jazz is worth checking out, and that's the idea of reimagination. The song On the Sunny Side of the Street has been performed all over the world. It's been played in many different styles, grooves, beats. It's been reinterpreted by many people, and this idea of reinterpretation is another hallmark of what jazz music is about. It speaks to the enduring nature of jazz and how jazz continues to transform itself from generation to generation. Now, it's great to learn about music that has come before us in the past, and indeed it's very important to check out the long history of jazz and to spend some time trying to emulate the players that have come before us. But as a young person, you might appreciate knowing that this art form is designed specifically, in my opinion, to welcome newness. It's okay to imagine, to reframe, and to reinterpret, that which has come before you. It's also important to know that jazz draws upon many different cultural practices and cultural traditions for its source material. These influences are often combined and reimagined and reinvented in new ways compared to the original. And on this reimagination point, I'd like to give you a little bit of homework to check out before our next jazz video. And don't worry, this homework will be fun. There's a beautiful piece of classical music by Tchaikovsky entitled The Nutcracker Suite, and it was written in 1892. Also, you should know that the great jazz composer Billy Strayhorn reimagined this wonderful piece by Tchaikovsky in 1960, and then Strayhorn had his version performed by the one and only Duke Ellington Orchestra. As a fun listening project for you, I'd like you to go check out Tchaikovsky's original Nutcracker Suite and compare the performance of each movement to Billy Strayhorn's jazzy version as you go. By listening movement by movement to the original and then switching to the jazz version right afterwards, you'll get a keen sense of how interesting this reimagination idea is as you go. Now, this is not to say that one version is better than the other. While listening to this really great music, check out all of the great improvisational moments by members of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. There's some really great and terrific things happening here. So when you go to do this exercise, I'll list here all of the original Tchaikovsky movements and their corresponding Billy Strayhorn movements so that you can listen to one right after the other. Now, I've had the great privilege of performing live this Nutcracker Suite, the classical version and the jazz version combined, twice in Saskatoon. It was a unique collaboration between the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra and the Saskatoon Jazz Orchestra, in which we played this music just as I've described to you: one movement classical, same movement jazz, next movement classical, next movement jazz. Here's a link to a conversation that I had with Eric Paetkow, who is the artistic director of the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra, about that concert, in which we talk a little bit about Tchaikovsky, a little bit about Ellington and Strayhorn, and how these two kind of musical worlds are brought together through this performance. Finally, here's a great link to a jazz series curated by the great Wynton Marsalis. Although there are all kinds of great educational resources out there, we hope that this video series that's specific to jazz will help students connect to high-quality educational aids like this Marsalis series. Although there's a lot of great stuff out there on the internet, there's also some stuff that's not so good, and we hope to help students get to the good stuff as quickly as possible. Now, if you have any questions about what I've been talking about in this video, feel free to drop me a line at deanmcneil.com. Here are the links we've been talking about. Thanks for watching, and happy International Jazz Day.